This learning is Le'ili Nishmas Broya Bas Chananya, Maseches Peah, Perek Dalid, Mishna Yud. We finished learning about the gift of Peah, and we will now begin learning about the gift of Leket. Ezehu Leket, which is Leket, Hanesher B'Shas Aktsira, what falls to the ground while cutting the crop. And like we'll learn later, this only applies if one or two stalks of the crop fell to the ground. The Mishnah continues, Haya Kaitzer, if someone was cutting the crop, whether it was Katsar Milayodai, that they were holding a fistful at a time and cutting it, or Talish Malay Kumsei, or if they plucked and forced out of the ground a fistful, if he kites v'nafal miyadei la'aretz, if the person was struck by a thorn and what was in his hand fell to the ground, so then hareu shel bal habayis, it belongs to the owner, because leket only applies if it happened naturally, but not when there was a reason for the person to drop it. The Mishnah continues and teaches that leket only applies if it occurred in the way that a person harvests, a person cuts the wheat. However, if it didn't happen in the way that a person usually harvests and cuts the wheat, then it's not considered leket. Toich hayad v'toich hamagal, if what fell to the ground was within the person's hand or within the sickle. So what this is referring to is when a person would cut the crop, they would grab a fistful with one hand and then they would swing the sickle with the other hand. Now, if it was either toich hayad, which means it was what the person was holding, so even if the person swung the sickle very, very tightly, and so it only cut part of what was in their hand, and the rest was cut when they pulled the sickle back on the return. So it's still within their hand, even though it was cut from the outside of the sickle. So whether it's within the hand, like in that example, or it's within the sickle, even if it's outside the person's hand, for example, if the person swung the sickle very widely and it also cut what was not in their hand, whether it's in either one of these categories, so if it falls to the ground by mistake, la'aniyim, it belongs to the poor people. And the reason for this is because this is the way of cutting the wheat. However, if it's achar hayad va'achar hamagal, if it's both outside of the hand and also it's cut with the back of the sickle, meaning that it was outside of the person's hand and it was only cut on when the person brought back the sickle. So then, such a case, what falls to the ground is labal labayis, to the owner. And the reason for this is because this is not in the way of cutting the wheat. The Mishnah continues, what is if it's reish hayad v'reish hamagal, meaning it's not within the hand, but it's not outside. It's right at the edge. The person didn't fit it into their hand. It's right at the edge between the tip of their fingers and their palm. Or if it wasn't cut by the inside of the sickle or the outside, but rather by the tip. So here we have an argument. Rabbi Shmuel Eimer la'anim. Rabbi Shmuel says it's for the poor because he sees it as being similar to inside the hand and inside the sickle. And Rabbi Kiva Eimer l'bal habayis. Rabbi Kiva says it's to the owner because he sees it as being like outside the hand and outside of the sickle.